on the area. Tachito Tatanga Lapa, the Yudi, any Romotella, Nanji made of a Chigin, Sipan Holo, Mituri Tagda. Yon Pichangachinola, and the Koyu Kolo Changaba Siat, and Nanji Yondala, Sipa Kolo Siati, Pichotongoro. Chezo Tomadi, Romodi, Ma Chaku chicken of the Romutin Jugo Siniti, Malantin chicken of the Sedesana, and the Tolosonji Jumdi, and the Korongi Karadesana, and the Malantin Chini, Romutin Jugu, the Ma Korongi Lantin, Macapa, no Juji Jeredo. Chezonta Romo de Juguya, Gobanda was zoned over the Karachado, the Sinan, Pena, Angata, the Concerteso, Tangadukaris, Chinian, and Sushi, the Jim Tepi, and the pay in the Concerteso, and the Chula Kuma, Gubi Chile. Chula Gubi Chile, that Chulan Jubi Chile, that Penachinian and Sushi, the Jim Tanki, that Nadamata, the Concerteso, the Chilling of the Pecaresana, Chila Payeni, Yellow, the Tudio, which Chichiba, Payin, the Nine on the road again. Anzadeso Chula Tukuy Chede, and the Caragina, and the Romoti Tuschin, in the Tuba Yisiwa, which is the Romoti Tuku, made over there, Takonda Carasana, Dujadeso, and the Chul Jubici, the Chula Pivici, and the Romoti Tuba Yesia, or Tenda Cheredo.
So this particular drawing or painting was actually commissioned by the Buddha himself, right? The Buddha himself gave the instructions as to how this particular painting at the time was drawn up. And so the purpose of having this painting kind of drawn up was in order for to have a very nice kind of visual representation of these teachings, such that people like myself who are kind of lazy and distracted can kind of see this painting and then be kind of reminded about the various teachings that it represents, and kind of so it also acts as something to kind of motivate us or kind of urge us to engage in the practice.
Chezon teche ta miuda romoti tuguya miuda teche ta thoma romoti chongtong da de kariji chong da chi ba loji da sibara ta jikshi ba da ji na ane na hamo ane pene jaga phabi yedela ane toma sonji chomde di ko chosho ka ko yi sonji chomde di sha ju bi kap tawala ane kari chomba resena tidigi jaga gi yewesna lomba 이 자보데라 가르스고르스는 chen 자보 조진이 모습다. 근데 베게라 자보 조진이 모습거다. 산스크리트 힌디토라 가리나 고마서. 주저 베게토라 자보 조진이 모습이야 되라. 아니 타고기 자보 타고스는 이용바 쿠주다 보기. 아니 자보 찌기. 아니 콜라 가르레스나 녀바죽고 바래서. 저도 나가마다고 옛날 편에 자가 롱바다고 코로니 있네 이노 롱바찌는 베 자보 뭐 쉬우지우도. 근데 자 롱바 코로나를 나가모트에나 자부 무기 자식이도 어떤득이 다 여기 자부 소진이 보세요 되라 여 타고기 자부 에네 데렌도 으타리아나스야 돼 으타리아스야 이게 가르데스나 아니 여기 자부 소진이 보세요 되라 아니 가도 가르데스나 페나 녀바스나 다 코로나 녀바 잘라다 아침부터 그 오래서 다 잘라다 가르데스나 간도 있는데 첩스고라 다 첩스나 다 난주스 고차스고 다 마데도 제비 카톨라 아니 나가모라고 이나치 바로보 당마이나 다 대송기지 지지기리 노시기 잘라주니 메데와인자 아니 저당 아니 나온다 아니 메다도 그 마자는 지리치고라 둘이 지유 카톨라 까야겠다 고차스야 첩스라고 지 어든득이 링통 첨부지 짜친부 쉬우지고 그래서 다들 약간인데 딱콜라 여유지 잡고 소지 니버텔라 여 타고기 잡고 어다야나 시야티 저기 링통 자유 고차지 거는데 다들라 말 내지 거고 그래 다 니버지 야 소소를 니버 첨부자 라사와에서 다 든득 니버텔라 내다고 지래 바지 거고인데 다 잡고 소지 니버기 가르 거고 하마고 같이네 아니 선제는 도스제네 가르시 바레스 아니 갈 타고기 잡고 뛰기 든득이 잘라서 아치 버리 통치부 들이지 거선스 단들라 아니 많이 바깔 거 그래서 어제 아니 손지 좀 되게 네배 가르스나 단다 아니 알아 람도다 보는 아니 단다 시바 콜로스야지 아니 람도는 로문 들이지 주인 아니 들이지 콜 많이 맞고 고시우스야 돼 아니 가르스나 손지게 말람도니 지도 로문이 정통다 봐대 어떻게 되고 단다 유타고 잡고 일다야나 써야 돼 님바 먹고니 들이기 제대로 손지게 람도는 로문 들이지 주시우스 아니 때 콜 고시우스 어떻게 되는 말람도는 말이야 돼 잘도
And so, in terms of the history of this particular painting, then it was to do with like a kind of back and forth between two kings in India. So one was the king Udayana, who was kind of king of like the central region in India, whereas the other was another king. So I have the Tibetan names, but not the Sanskrit names. I was trying to find it, but so there was another king, and this king was king of a country further out in the east. So then, what was happening is that the king Udayana had received a gift from this other king, this gift of this very fine kind of bejeweled armor, armor like you wear to go out to war. So there was a very beautiful and bejeweled and precious kind of armor that he gave him as a present from one king to another. And then this King Udayana was really appreciative and really happy to have received this gift. And then he didn't really know what to give in return. He had no idea what to give back in return. And so the king went, and at the time the Buddha was residing there in the nearby vicinity. So he went to ask the Buddha, what kind of gift he should give in return. And so in response, the Buddha then commissions to have this particular painting made, such that he could have a copy of it painted, and then give that as the gift to the other king. And it is said that the other king, upon seeing it, kind of immediately attained liberation and things like that. So that's kind of the history of how this painting kind of originated.
Ripa nombo da tunji shu ji san o da na ya da jabo khorong nombo ri mo bo ji ani da na tini yana chuni ga long ju do de sa no ko ni ani pe nyane chi bi ni ga la ani pha bi kong bo da ja bi kong bo to ya ani ba wa pha bi lang mo na ji ga o tu gi ka re na ani jungwa re so je so san ji ge dong bo ni tu gi si ni ani si ba kholo gi da ku ni mi de son son ya ge che de si ba kholo de tu ni ma ko on de ta ya na si ya tu gi tu nombo ri mo bo ji ani di ko nyane chi ga on de ni pe ka re na pha bi kong bo
So I'm sorry, so it seems like it was the other way around. Udayana was the king that received the painting, right, as opposed to being the one who sent it. So Udayana was the one who received the painting, and then him having seen having even just by kind of looking at it and understanding what it was representing, was able to achieve the state of a foe destroyer, the state of an arhat, merely by seeing it and understanding the kind of the meaning that is being represented there.
코아도 타비고기 나자도 중요 요소 그래. 단 니노는 쪼다고 가르쳐도 그랬으나 대용이 가르스나 뎀바시고니 덴시고는 코아는 조동동 아니 코아를 두게 람바티기 아니 덴춘고 요소 로무티기 쪼다고 춘야도 가르쳐서나 만족되는 산주 좀 되지 뭐바서도 sonjina waranzalo toma denji chugo son barwa denji chugo son kadola demashi zo kararasena koalo juge rambado koalo dube rambado songu yinsa o ta denju gumo de naja de zo chunde da bade ani denshi gu gonya koalo jubada ani koalo dube rambade naja de ani chungu yesi ani chunde zo da bade o de yinsa de chagdo.
And so in general, what this painting represents, or what it's kind of illustrating, is the way in which we enter into samsara, the way in which we end up cycling within samsara again and again. But likewise, it is also representing the way in which we can exit from samsara, in which we can bring an end to samsara and be liberated from it. So in that way, it's representing both samsara and nirvana, samsara and liberation. And this is kind of representing the kind of the core teachings of the Buddha, right? Because the Buddha himself, once he attained enlightenment, and he gave, under the Bodhi tree, and then he went to Sanath, and it was in Sanath near Varanasi where he gave his first teaching, which was about the Four Noble Truths. So even in these Four Noble Truths, what he was really teaching about was exactly this: the way in which we cycle within samsara by way of the truth of suffering and the truth of origin, and the way that we can attain liberation by way of the truth of cessation and the path.
자지지 아니 드지 아니 대숨이 요소래 제도 대상이 가르친 거 요소와이나 마정수 줄로 여기 가르친 거라서는 너자 시동 아니 또 무슨 저기 요소 대상이 춘대들 가르쳐서는 기마티노라 로마티노라 아니 자도 파바도 르슨이지 다 디노니 콘숨이 가르친 거 요래서는 너자스야 가르친 거 자되게 춘 거 요소 자되게 제도 자스야 가르쳐서는 지난주에는 다 소자 게신지기 레지는 더 차치실라고 지 차도가 해서 가르쳐서는 너차가 손내들 자주 아니 시도 손내들 가르쳐서는 되게 가르치도 중요했어. 제가 아주 난주 시주라고 하려 드스야데 시다 콘로 차바도 멍차고 깨지 시고 와 근데 뒤노시도 쓰야 콘로 차고 쉬지도 빼자 제가 되게 손내들 가르쳐서는 아니 드드 중요했어. 다tumog이 천대시야다 가르쳐서는 아니 파바 중요했어. 파바시야데 시다기 조바이마다 조마이마다 어느 소소는 뇌지바 인게도 가리 인게 시다기 나이디 시다 치면다가 이제 아니 가르쳐서는 대찬이 아니 파바스야 돼. 아니 또보기 천대에서 이제 자동 찌 들이지는 이유도 찌 들이지는 이유를 했어야 대지지. 영어 레가시 가르쳐서는 너무 충도 가르쳐서는 너무 써야 돼. 근데 이다고 해서 안토니 파바스야 돼. 가되는 지 사야도 통해 들이 가리 마도지 니코야라 가고 쉬지 요래서. 들리고 뭔게 아니 가르쳐서는 너무 준비체데 아니 파바 주바이스 들이지에서
So in terms of this painting, we can kind of divide it into four sections, starting from the middle, right? Starting from the middle of the drawing and kind of working our way out. And so we find these kind of concentric circles depicting different things. And so we can start with the first circle right in the middle, where we see this representation of a pig, a bird, and then a snake. Right in the middle circle. And so what these three animals are representing are what are called the three root afflictions, the three root mental afflictions of ignorance, attachment, and anger. Right? And so the pig is representing ignorance. Right? And so some people say it represents ignorance because the pig is kind of not very intelligent, and then they just kind of root around in the dirt, and they kind of just, they're kind of easily distracted by things, and they just kind of mess around, and that's kind of all they do. So since they're not very intelligent animals, then they represent ignorance. But other people say that it's because they just eat anything, like they're not picky with what they eat, they'll just eat whatever is put in front of them, and then the rest of the time they just sleep. So this kind of thing of all they do is eat and sleep, then again this is kind of a representation of ignorance, right? So in that way the pig representing ignorance. And then the bird is representing attachment. Right? Because it is said that the birds have a great sense of kind of attachment and pride in their looks, and so they kind of represent the sense of attachment. And then likewise the snake is representing anger, right? Because snakes are known to be kind of very kind of angry kind of creatures, and sometimes we even say, oh, that person is angry like a snake, apparently. And so the snake in that sense representing anger. So in this way, the three poisons of ignorance, attachment, and anger are being represented by these three animals.
제도 다들 rumudum delmada 지랑으로 당자들 맞아 rumud들 디노 따와이나 제 파바 카이노니 자데 자이 카는 드드니 도시 코런트 드리지 용되기도 와 다들 가르 총교에서는 지 칸의 지 칸의 지 된도야 디 가르치고에서는 너자시도 또 무슨 대용 찍딜라디니 지 중고요 봐 지를 찍 된도가 봐대 아니 총교 용미체데 아니 rumud 투바 인스 rumud 투비에서 드리지 두도 와 로무찌 노는 데스톤도 저도 가르 용거에서나 다들 디노라 파비카니 자동 자이카니 드스 드리 용도지 주도지 로무찌 노는 가르 쪽에서는 자동 pena dredi nija pabika ni dus ma dande ye chitu gore chitu degi karu chungu yesinayo zo nimo taji ki zawanda bote yongsa da bo zawanda bote de cha chutu tomu samare di no ni zo de karesina maripa chitu maripa yenza maripa zo koronson di no ni zawanda bote karesina maripa yenza ta de cha to ani shidoni de ani zo maripa de ni yong bi chue chede ani cha do de ni ani pabika na ma yong yo ba de 두고야 미유도 가서 천년에 어디지 두고 예서 도동문다 니라고 지금 예서 디지레 디상
So the reason it's these three particular afflictions that are being represented is because these three are said to be the root afflictions or the foundational afflictions out of which all other negative states of mind or all other afflictions arise. Right? So they act as the main cause or the root for all of the other types of afflictions. And so now there's two different ways in which this painting is sometimes painted, and they represent slightly different things. So in our version of the painting, we have that the bird is coming out of the mouth of the pig, and the snake from the bird, and the snake and the pig from the snake. Right? They're each kind of coming out of the mouth of the next one. And so that is depicting it in this way is in order to represent how there's this kind of mutual dependence between these root afflictions. How it's anger gives rise to ignorance, and ignorance to attachment, and attachment to anger, and then to more ignorance, and kind of in this cycle of mutual dependence where they feed upon each other. But there is also a second way to depict this, where instead of the way that we have it, you would see that both the bird and the snake are both coming from the mouth of the pig, right? And so depicting it in that way is to represent how, although we refer to them as the three root poisons, among those the foundation or the root is ignorance, right? And so ignorance is even at the root of attachment and anger. And so that's why the bird and the snake are coming out of the mouth of the pig, to show that at the very root is this ignorance.
리카나니 세온데 리카보 세온데 베네 기빌리도 미기빌리디니 중요해서 로 기빌리도 미기빌리니 다다 소수 가르레스는 까보여서 디기 가르레스는 베나 나조 덴도 까까보 디기 리카보 디기 가르 핑고스데 덴도 지원 핑고이자 지제 다 나보 디기 가르 중거스는 리라보스 미기빌리자 아니 가르 니송선 딜 가르 담 핀지기 제다보데 아니 수양게 제데 리카나니 춤이 제데 아니 가르지나 까보지다 나보지 어드리지리 저기였어야 대지 작도 대지제 아니 제도 다 가르스나 벤 나도 데도는 좀 괜다고 니니 체피니 소소 데도를 지원이 괜다고 저요는 뒤니 빠시빠데 아니 지 소소 농원에서나 가르지 샤고 그래서나 아니 지 다와 침몰 다유기 웹첩돼야 배 농아 까보다 니마 샤데야 노시기 강르다 니마 샤데야 뒤니기 농아지 연구여스 데도는 좀 얘기 아니 봐도와지나 제편이 봐도니 데도는 좀 얘기나 뒤니기 봐도와데 농만 드리지 차비에 지시기도 와 당 인도는 로기나 아니 사르니 침몰 배 나고는 뒤니 만로 되와다 보다 대형만 튀는 로데와 뒤니기 농아기 봐도와데라 뒤니지 유그레서 다 건다 철로기 까보도 나보티 가르스네 리카나니기 딱 제사기 덴도 딱라도 미 공부될 지게 봐도 처마디 가르스는 년도 녀와야다 안에 저도 지지기니 레이든 숨이 체데 안에 보나니 바데 어토시니 디레츠네디다보 도시인시아 디지 작도.
And so the next circle going out is we see this half white and half black circle, and so this is depicting our different, as it were, black and white karmas, right? In the sense of black representing non-virtuous karmas and white representing virtuous karmas or actions, right? And likewise, as we discussed, here we are discussing, such that these virtuous or white or meritorious actions are those leading to rebirth within the higher realms of humans and devas, and then the non-virtuous or the black or the non-meritorious actions leading to rebirth within the three lower realms of the hell beings, the hungry ghosts, and animals. And so the reason why they're represented as being black and white is in dependence upon the appearance to the particular bardo being that will be reborn there. So the intermediate state being, as we discussed. So when that particular action ripens and the being enters into the bardo, it is said that in dependence upon a meritorious action leading to the higher realms, then the type of appearance of the bardo for the bardo being will be bright like daytime. It will be kind of bright like sunlight or moonlight, or kind of something very bright. So that is represented in white. Whereas for the intermediate state beings who are heading towards the lower realms, it is said that the appearance during that time is very dark, like night time. So that's why it's represented in the black. And so in this way, whether it's virtuous or non-virtuous actions leading to the higher realm or the lower realms, they're being represented here by these two semicircles of black and white.
dentro della lato mado lama yisumyora o tetsuk chönya gi chide kabutino la yundi gi romati jogi dentro gi kombo della lato mado lama yisum chönde je chuju dena karazna nabo yasatino romo gashin go tole dene ramada siadegi nyawa don yada don on tondo la soba o karazna da litela dini prosagi ni nyawa de yada don tondo la soba chönya gi chede du chine romati tyen sara de jiresha.
And then the beings within those two halves are kind of meant to represent the different types of beings within these six realms. So on the left-hand side, the side representing the higher realms, then we see kind of depictions of humans, gods and demigods being represented. Whereas on the right-hand side, it's meant to represent the beings in the three lower realms of the hell realms, the hungry ghost realm, and the animal realm. So one kind of going up in terms of the higher realms, and one going down in terms of the lower realms.
Tini ki rumosamba paransamba tinola kareresna taminda bor kasesna ngana bodi yungdoa ti tegi karetsunesna ngaso doa ringati chedayina doa rito chigere ringa shigere tenda chiba char karetsun doa ringa shiyundu karechado doa rito shiyundu penandero dendo dela sumchindore la me lama yin sumji ani nyawa yeda tando o tinga chadora ta ringa chilu ka chado la dong mes ma to lama yin lu chigo ma la do meni lama yin ma che ba la do meni ka lama yin la ni loga ma che ba ji zhen do de ani do ga chado gore la do lama yin ni so so chen do de ka re na do ri to chado gore ta de ni khu do la ka re mo de la ka tuje re na la do lama yin ni do ji khu do la dong ni ani dino le cheda bo da porada bo karesna rumo da khada bo ngadi doa o ngadi karesna doa ringa chönya gi chede ani karesna rumo di tu la da lama yin ni chukji li tu shin tu jere sia de jere ndo.
And then moving again one more concentric circle out, we then see the depictions of the different realms, right? So in this third circle, we see the depiction here of the 5 realms of existence. So now sometimes we talk about the 5 realms and sometimes we talk about the 6 realms, but really it comes to the same thing. It's mainly in dependence upon whether one divides the God realm into gods and demigods and then counts that as 2, or whether that just is being counted as 1. So if we count them separately, you would end up with 6 realms, but counting them together, you end up having 5. So in our particular depiction here, we see it on the top left kind of section, where you kind of have the bottom and the top half of it depicting both the demigods and the gods in one particular section, and then so by subsuming those 2 into one, we end up with 5 sections depicting the 5 realms.
다 단다 rumudegi demba shi de continue di nono la karesna ngaso demba shi de pena de chadong de dong ane papa sum degi karesna ane nyomo bi kunjon de je de solo la kabo do nabuni yodo adi leji ko de demba shi ni hol ramba tongbo ni no yodo ya de tongbo degi 자도 더도 대승 가르스는 녀무 군조들 니와 리지 군조도 녀무 군조 니지 노니 딱 가르스는 동보숨되기 녀무 군조데 되니 가버 나버디 리지 군조데 제 되니 측라운들 같이 하고 그래서는 단단 로아 링마 단 로아 레 독시 돼야 돼 동아대 봐도 되니 측 탈로로 콜었다 되니 연락준이 시돼야 되기 아니 집 가르스는 동아대 맞추고 예스 노노라 예대 로마티니게 군조데 봐도 되니 솔루가 라바니데 가르스는 되게 동아대 봐 오토시도 충게 예스 된다고 제래샤
And so, within just these three circles, right, these middle three circles, is actually depicted the first two noble truths, right? That, in the sense that when we think about the first two circles of the three animals and the black and white circles, that is representing the second noble truth of the truth of the origin of suffering. In that when we divide the truth of origin, we divide it into afflictions and karma, right? And so the very center circle with the three animals depicting the three root afflictions is therefore depicting this the second noble truths in terms of afflictions. And then the two semicircles of black and white will depict the second noble truth in terms of karma. And then the five realms, the next circle out, these five realms are depicting the various states in which we take rebirth. And so they are depicting the first noble truth, the truth of suffering. And so in that way, within these three circles, we have the first noble truths and the second noble truths being represented.
kusuchi tudo kusuchi tu sadru jungdo ya de sanji kusudi kan sungu yesna lamje de masya da panzo zo de pojo de gogoji do gogo te karesna dawa yimi ki de dawa chezo te ki karesna guden sungu yes chezo de bashin sunno da wayina sanji siya de landen de chya da dawa gogo de ki dawa yiso gore te karesna taba guden siya de sungu yes ya de chiche
And then likewise, the outer circle, which is what we'll be looking at as depicting the 12 links, then that is also said to depict, kind of jointly, also depicting the first two noble truths in a slightly different way. So then in terms of the entire circle, right, everything that is contained within the circle, that is all depicting the first two noble truths, the truth of suffering and the truth of origin. And then in terms of the truth of cessation and truth of the path, then that is being depicted, so on the top right, we have this image of the Buddha pointing, right? So that is depicting the truth of the path. And what the Buddha is pointing to is on the top left, so in our drawing it's quite small, but it's this little circle at the top left, which is actually meant to be the moon, yeah? And so he's pointing towards the moon, and the moon is representing the third noble truth of the truth of cessation.
능을 때는 아주 가르쳐서는 어디는 가시기 두치네 야접돼서 도간 두치네 마접돼서 지도 어디기를 뭐디 가르쳐 중에서는 라도 하마니 니디 가르쳐는 로바디 어디기 중에서 라도 하마니 지다 단다지 어디야 마장 야 다운다 담을 자딩게 하마니 쓰게요래 가운데는 마치게다 사이서 되기 로바디는 가르쳐나 다 로아 레이마 치와이나 라도 하마니 년도 동로야지 디니기 가르쳐나 하마니 써야 되지 디니 수주기 로마디 가르쳐나 메시아데 차고로 메시아데 얘네다 저 주주들 지들이디샤 니는 대주인도 예다스야 돼. 콘리티컬 페 조구 첨부 용계다 공부 추종 용계다 어디 가르서는 그러다 예다스야 되지. 디니 타마디 기마디고 어디 가르친 거에서는 냐왔어야 돼. 그러와 근데 파주 때는 다 던도다 신지기를 인다마도 이제 대 가르서는 근데 던도스야기 니디 충고에서 하고 던도고 제리디샤. 저 최종 다대 가르서는 로아리 쪽 But
getting back to the third circle representing the five realms, then just to describe what each of these are individually, then if we look to the top left section of the circle, then we see the two realms being represented here. So the top half representing the Deva realm or the God realm, and then the bottom half representing the realm of the demigods, right? So on the top we have the gods, and on the bottom we have the demigods. And then to the right of that, the section to the right of that, we see is depicting humans in various activities. So that is representing the human realm, right? And then moving clockwise along, the right-hand section with these creatures with like very large bellies and small mouths and thin necks. So that is representing the realms of the hungry ghosts, right? The realm of the hungry ghosts. And then moving further down to the bottom section, then that is representing the hell realms. And then moving on to the section on the left-hand side of the drawing, we see there kind of various types of animals and different animals being drawn. So that is representing the animal realm, right? And so in this way, we have the representation of the 6 types of realms where one can take rebirth in these 5 sections.
Mm-hmm.